Sarah had always known the ancient oak was more than just a tree, towering above the tidy houses of her quiet neighborhood. Its massive branches stretched wide like the arms of a guardian, sheltering the streets below from the harsh sun. For decades, the oak had stood in silent witness to birthdays, barbecues, and quiet evenings, its thick bark marked by time, its roots deeply tangled with the history of the land itself. On warm spring evenings, Sarah would sit beneath its sprawling canopy, feeling the gentle rustle of leaves, whisper stories of the past. Her children had climbed its sturdy limbs, and she had planted her own seedlings nearby, hoping to pass down the tree's legacy to future generations. The neighborhood considered the tree a landmark, a symbol of stability in a world that seemed to change faster every day. But that afternoon, as she sipped her tea on the porch, a small envelope slipped through the mail slot, landing on the floor with a soft thud. The cream-colored paper was embossed with the HOA's official seal, a sign Sarah hadn't wanted to see in a long time. She picked it up with a sinking feeling in her chest. The notice was brief but chilling. A scheduled HOA meeting to discuss community improvements and development plans, including potential landscaping adjustments. There was no mention of her beloved oak, no warning that this quiet sanctuary might soon face a threat. That night, Sarah found herself restless. Her mind spun with questions and unease. Why had the HOA called the meeting so suddenly? What could community improvements mean, really? She glanced out the window at the oak silhouette against the darkening sky, the branches swaying softly in the breeze. In the days that followed, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip and speculation. Some residents mentioned rumors of new parking, spaces to accommodate a surge of visitors to the local shops. Others whispered about a developer eager to expand his property, with the HOA eager to cooperate. But no one seemed willing to speak openly, as if afraid of stirring up trouble. Sarah's unease grew when she noticed strange cars parked late at night near the tree, unmarked vans and workers milling around in the shadows, as if they were waiting for something or someone. The air felt charged, heavy with secrets. One evening, determined to uncover the truth, Sarah attended the HOA meeting. The community center was packed with neighbors, their faces tense and expectant. The board president stood at the podium, speaking in measured tones about enhancing property values and modernizing community amenities. But when the floor opened for questions, Sarah's voice cut through the polite murmurs. "What exactly does this mean for the oak tree on my property?" she asked, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. The room fell silent. The board president's smile tightened. "Ms. Bennett," he said carefully, "the tree in question is part of common land, not private property. It may be removed to make way for necessary infrastructure." Sarah's heart pounded. "That tree has stood on my land for over 50 years, she insisted, "and it's protected by local ordinances. You can't just take it without permission." The president's eyes flicked to the HOA lawyer sitting beside him, who quickly intervened. "This matter is still under review. We advise patience as we work through the planning process." Frustrated, but undeterred, Sarah left the meeting with a growing sense of dread. The ancient oak, her family's silent witness, was at risk, and she realized this fight would not be easy. That night, as she lay awake, the wind howled through the branches outside, as if warning her of the battle to come. The days after the HOA meeting were heavy with silence and uncertainty. Sarah found herself constantly glancing toward the ancient oak, its familiar silhouette seeming smaller somehow, more vulnerable under the grey sky. The official meeting had offered little reassurance, only vague promises and rehearsed smiles. But something in the air told her this was just the beginning. Late one afternoon, Sarah was out watering her flower beds when she noticed a group of unfamiliar men parked across the street. They leaned casually against a black van, their eyes scanning the neighborhood with an unsettling intensity. Their presence was out of place in the usually quiet cul-de-sac, and Sarah's instincts prickled with suspicion. Over the next few days, those strangers seemed to multiply. New cars appeared at odd hours, sometimes parked along the street, other times creeping closer to her property line. Sarah's neighbors, usually friendly and open, grew tight-lipped, exchanging quick glances when she brought up the subject of the oak. At the grocery store, she overheard snippets of hushed conversations about big changes and getting rid of obstacles. An old man muttered about greedy developers, while a woman warned, "You don't want to cross the HOA. They're not playing fair." That night, Sarah sat by the window, the darkened oak casting long shadows across her lawn. The silence was shattered by the sudden sound of engines, low, rumbling, and relentless. She peered outside and spotted a convoy of trucks, idling near the far end of the neighborhood, their headlights piercing the darkness. She grabbed her phone and dialed her closest neighbor, Mark. "Are you seeing this too?" she whispered. "Yeah," Mark replied, voice tense. "I don't know what's going on, but they're definitely gearing up for something. I've never seen the HOA bring in this many contractors without warning." Sarah's heart hammered. She realized this wasn't just about parking spaces anymore. It was a covert operation, planned under the cover of night to avoid public scrutiny. Determined not to be caught off guard, Sarah began documenting everything. She snapped photos of the strange vehicles, jotted down license plates, and recorded conversations whenever possible. She reached out to the local environmental group she'd once volunteered with, hoping to find allies who might help protect the oak and expose any illegal activity. One evening, as she walked near the edge of her property, Sarah noticed fresh tire tracks leading to the base of the ancient tree. The earth was disturbed, and faint markings suggested recent survey work, a silent sign that the machinery might soon follow. Her phone buzzed with an anonymous text. "Drop it or you'll regret it." Fear surged through her veins, but so did determination. Sarah refused to back down. If the HOA thought intimidation would silence her, they had another thing coming. She attended the next HOA meeting, hoping for transparency, for answers. But once again, the board skirted the issue. The president's smooth voice and rehearsed assurances couldn't mask the underlying threat. "They're hiding something," Sarah thought, glancing around at the stiff faces and forced smiles. "And I'm gonna find out what." That night, as she prepared for bed, a sudden crash outside shattered the quiet. She rushed to the window and saw a broken street lamp swinging in the wind. Its glass shattered on the pavement below. Nearby, tire tracks disappeared into the darkness. A warning or a message. Sarah's pulse quickened. The shadows creeping over her neighborhood were no longer just metaphorical. Someone wanted the oak gone, and they were willing to go to great lengths to make it happen. But Sarah wasn't alone. Somewhere in the quiet, others were watching, waiting. And when the time came, they would stand with her. Sarah barely slept that night. Every creak of the house, every distant noise, jolted her awake with a surge of adrenaline. She sat by the window, eyes fixed on the ancient oak silhouette, its dark limbs casting twisted shadows across the lawn. Around midnight, the neighborhood was swallowed by silence. Too silent, Sarah thought. Then, the unmistakable sound of chainsaws shattered the quiet, ripping through the night like a scream. Heart pounding, Sarah threw on her robe and dashed outside. her bare feet pounding against the cold pavement. Ahead, under the weak glow of a street lamp, she saw the flash of headlamps and the silhouette of men working quickly and silently, almost furtively, around the base of her beloved oak. "No, stop!" she shouted, but her voice was swallowed by the roar of machinery. One of the men glanced her way, eyes cold and unreadable. Sarah froze, then pulled out her phone, fingers trembling as she tried to capture video evidence. The men didn't stop. They seemed to be operating under orders, confident they had the cover of night and no witness who could stop them. The chainsaws bit into the ancient oak's trunk, sparks flying as bark and wood splintered. Sarah's knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, tears blurring her vision. This wasn't just a tree. It was part of her family's history, a sacred landmark. Suddenly, headlights flooded the street as a dark SUV pulled up. A man stepped out, sharply dressed, face shadowed under a cap. He barked orders, gesturing for the crew to speed up. Sarah recognized him from previous HOA meetings. The board president himself, the very person who had denied her the truth. "Get it done, before anyone else wakes up," he hissed. Despite the cold, sweat broke out on Sarah's brow. She knew she had to act fast. She scrambled to her feet and ran to the neighbor's house, pounding on the door until Mark answered groggily. "Something's happening. The HOA is cutting down the oak." "Now," she gasped. Mark grabbed his flashlight and rushed outside with her. Together, they watched in helpless horror as the ancient oak began to topple, crashing onto the ground with a terrifying finality. The sound echoed through the night, a brutal punctuation mark. "Why would they do this without permission?" Mark whispered. Sarah shook her head, voice thick with disbelief. "Because they want to erase the proof. The tree is in the way of their plans." As the crew loaded the massive trunk onto a flatbed truck, Sarah spotted something odd. A piece of torn paper snagged on a broken branch. She fished it out, unfolding it to reveal a hastily scrawled note. "Don't trust anyone. We'll be watching." A chill ran down her spine. Someone wanted her silenced. And clearly, this was bigger than just a parking lot. The next morning, Sarah woke to a neighborhood buzzing with shock. Neighbors gathered in small groups, faces pale as news spread of the illegal removal. Some blamed vandals, others suspected rogue contractors. But Sarah knew better. She called the local authorities, reporting the theft and destruction. The police took her statement, but warned that without a clear chain of evidence, the case could be difficult to prove. Undeterred, Sarah turned to the town's historical society. She hoped they could provide documentation about the oak's significance and possibly strengthen her claim. That afternoon, she met with an elderly historian, Mrs. Coleman, who examined photographs and maps dating back over a century. "This tree has been here since the earliest days of the town," Mrs. Coleman said gravely. "It's not just a tree. It's a living monument." Sarah felt a surge of hope. If the town recognized the oak's importance, the HOA's actions could be challenged legally. But as she left the historian's office, Sarah's phone buzzed with an unknown caller. The voice on the other end was cold, threatening. "Stop digging, Sarah, or you'll regret it." The line went dead. Sarah clenched her fists, determination blazing anew. They had taken her tree, but they hadn't taken her spirit. The morning sun cast long shadows across Sarah's yard, but the light did little to chase away the gloom hanging over her heart. The ancient oak was gone, ripped from the earth in the dead of night, stolen without warning or permission. Yet the fight had just begun. Sarah sat at her kitchen table, phone in hand, waiting anxiously for the HOA board president to return her calls. She wasn't the type to back down, but this was bigger than any dispute she'd faced before. Her family's history, the neighborhood's legacy, everything she valued was under siege. When the call finally came, the voice on the other end was calm, almost rehearsed. Ms. Bennett, the HOA has reviewed your concerns. We maintain that the tree was on HOA common property, and all actions taken were within our jurisdiction. Sarah's blood boiled. That tree has stood on my private property for over 50 years. You have no right to remove it without my consent. There was a pause, then a sigh. Property lines can be complicated. We followed the best available records. Sarah wasn't buying it. Over the next few days, she pored over property deeds, city surveys, and tax maps, all pointing to the same undeniable truth. The oak was firmly on her land. The HOA's claims were a thin veil, covering an illegal act. Frustrated but undeterred, Sarah requested a formal meeting with the board. The day arrived, and she stepped into the community center with a mixture of resolve and dread. The room was cold and sterile, filled with stiff-faced board members, and the HOA's lawyer, a sharp-eyed man who seemed ready for a battle. Sarah laid out her evidence clearly. Property documents, photos, and expert testimony about the trees, location, and importance. This isn't just a dispute over a tree, she said firmly. It's a violation of my rights as a homeowner and a breach of the community's trust. The board president listened impassively, then leaned forward. Ms. Bennett, we sympathize, but the decision was made for the greater good. The parking expansion will benefit all residents. We followed protocol as we understood it. Sarah's voice rose. You didn't follow protocol. No notice, no consent, and you removed the tree under the cover of darkness. The lawyer interjected, smoothly. Legal definitions of notice and consent can be complex. We believe we acted within the rules. Sarah glared at them, feeling the walls closing in. But then, she noticed something strange. A folded envelope, half hidden under a stack of papers, on the lawyer's desk. On it, faintly visible, was her name and the word confidential. After the meeting, Sarah managed to slip the envelope into her bag without anyone noticing. Back home, she opened it carefully. Inside were emails and memos, revealing a troubling truth. Some board members had quietly approved the removal months ago, bypassing the full HOA vote, and deliberately misrepresented the tree's location to cover their tracks. A cold wave of betrayal washed over her. This wasn't just negligence. It was a calculated deception. That night, Sarah received another warning. A letter slipped under her door. Stop digging or face the consequences. This time, the threat felt more sinister, more immediate. Her friends urged caution, but Sarah's resolve only hardened. If the HOA thought intimidation would make her go away, they were wrong. She reached out to an environmental lawyer, recommended by the historian she met earlier. The lawyer confirmed that the HOA's actions likely violated several local ordinances protecting mature trees and homeowners' rights. Armed with legal advice and her growing evidence, Sarah prepared to escalate the battle. But she knew the path ahead would be fraught with obstacles. Political, legal, and perhaps even personal. As she stood by the empty patch of earth where the oak once stood, a strange sound caught her attention. The faint rustling of leaves from the far edge of her property. She turned sharply, heart pounding, but saw nothing but shadows. In the distance, a car's headlights flickered before speeding away. The message was clear. The HOA's denial was only the beginning. Someone wanted her silenced, and they were watching her every move. But Sarah wasn't backing down. The stolen ancient oak left a hollow ache in Sarah's heart, but it also ignited a fierce determination she couldn't ignore. She wasn't just fighting for a tree, she was fighting for justice, for the integrity of her home, and for the truth buried beneath layers of deception. The envelope she had stolen from the HOA meeting wasn't just a smoking gun. It was a key to unraveling a scheme far more sinister than she had imagined. That evening, she spread out the papers on her kitchen table, reading every email, memo, and contract with growing disbelief. The documents revealed that the HOA board president had been in secret talks with a local developer, a man known for aggressive land deals and controversial projects. The plan was clear. The parking lot wasn't just to serve the neighborhood. It was a stepping stone for a commercial expansion that would drastically change the community's character. Even worse, the ancient oak stood directly on a plot this developer coveted. The tree was in the way, a beautiful, living obstacle to the profits looming on the horizon. Sarah's fingers trembled as she read a disturbing email thread. It appeared some board members had quietly voted in favor of the removal without alerting the rest of the HOA or the homeowners. They had falsified survey reports and misrepresented property lines to justify their actions. This wasn't just negligence or poor judgment. It was fraud. Overwhelmed but resolute, Sarah knew she needed help. She reached out to her environmental lawyer, Elena, who listened carefully and immediately suggested involving the local authorities. The falsified documents alone could lead to serious legal consequences. Elena said, "If we can prove the developer's involvement, we might halt the expansion and hold those responsible accountable." Sarah's next step was to find a trustworthy surveyor to re-examine her property lines and verify the tree's exact location. After days of phone calls, she found Tom, a no-nonsense professional with a reputation for integrity. When Tom arrived, Sarah showed him the now empty patch where the oak had stood. He nodded thoughtfully and spent hours measuring and documenting every inch, cross-referencing city records and historical maps. A week later, Tom delivered his report. The tree was unequivocally on Sarah's private property, protected by multiple environmental laws. The HOA had no legal right to remove it, much less without her consent. With this irrefutable evidence, Sarah felt her confidence swell, but she knew the real challenge was still ahead, exposing the board's deception and taking on a powerful developer who wouldn't go down without a fight. She contacted a local investigative journalist, hoping to bring public attention to the story. The journalist, Mark Reynolds, was intrigued by the mix of environmental damage, corporate greed, and small-town betrayal. "I want to hear everything," Mark said, scheduling an interview for the next day. As Sarah prepared for the interview, her phone buzzed with a new message. "Stop stirring the pot, or you'll regret it." Her heart pounded. But this time, fear was mingled with a fierce resolve. The following day, Mark's article hit the community like a storm. It detailed the secret meetings, the falsified surveys, and the developer's ambitions, painting a clear picture of corruption. The story went viral locally, sparking outrage and prompting officials to launch an investigation. Neighbors who had stayed silent now came forward with stories of similar suspicious activities, and a grassroots coalition began forming to protect the neighborhood's natural and historical treasures. But with the spotlight shining brighter, Sarah sensed the opposition growing more desperate. Late one evening, as she returned home from a community meeting, she noticed her tires slashed and a menacing note tucked under her windshield wiper. "Back off now." Sarah's hand shook as she read the threat. The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just a battle over a tree. It was a fight for the soul of the neighborhood, and Sarah was ready. The slash marks on her tires were more than vandalism. They were a declaration. Sarah knew the battle had escalated from whispered threats to outright intimidation, but instead of fear, a fire ignited within her. The ancient oak may have been gone, but its spirit fueled her resolve to fight back. Harder. The community had rallied around her cause. Local news covered the unfolding scandal. Neighbors attended meetings in droves, and a coalition of residents formed a committee to investigate the HOA and the developer's shady dealings. Sarah, once isolated in her fight, found allies in unexpected places. Yet the opposition was no less formidable. The HOA board dug in, issuing official statements, denying wrongdoing, and painting Sarah as a troublemaker, disrupting community harmony. The developer's legal team sent letters warning of costly lawsuits if Sarah pursued her claims. Despite this, Sarah's lawyer, Elena, prepared to file a formal complaint against the HOA and the developer, citing illegal tree removal, fraud, and intimidation. Elena stressed the importance of gathering as much evidence as possible to build a solid case. Sarah turned her home into a command center, organizing documents, videos, and witness statements. She coordinated with neighbors willing to testify and kept detailed records of every encounter, every threat. One evening, as the coalition met in Sarah's living room, voices were low but determined. Mark Reynolds, the investigative journalist, shared updates from his ongoing inquiries. "There's more than just the oak," Mark said quietly. "I've uncovered plans for a commercial complex that would uproot several homes and green spaces." A heavy silence settled over the room. The stakes were even higher than Sarah had feared. The next morning, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. The town's mayor. He expressed concern over the growing unrest and promised to initiate an independent review of the HOA's actions. "Sarah, I want to assure you that the city will get to the bottom of this," he said, his tone earnest but cautious. While grateful, Sarah knew political promises could be fragile. She needed to keep the pressure on. Then came the turning point. Late one night, Sarah's home security cameras captured footage of a group attempting to access her backyard. She alerted the police, who increased patrols and offered protection. The intrusion was a stark reminder. Her adversaries were desperate and dangerous. Undeterred, Sarah and her coalition organized a peaceful protest. Outside the HOA's next meeting, residents held signs demanding accountability and the preservation of their neighborhood's heritage. Inside the meeting, the board faced an unprecedented crowd. Sarah presented the evidence collected, her voice steady despite the tension. "This isn't just about one tree," she declared. "It's about transparency, respect, and the future of our community." For the first time, the board was on the defensive. Questions flew from residents demanding answers. As the meeting ended, a flicker of change seemed possible. The mayor's office announced an immediate halt to all development plans pending investigation. But Sarah knew the battle was far from over. That night, as she stood by the empty patch where the oak once stood, the wind whispered through the leaves of neighboring trees. She closed her eyes, feeling the ancient spirit of the oak within her. The fight was just beginning. But this time, she was ready for whatever came next. The reprieve brought by the mayor's intervention was short-lived. As the investigation into the HOA's illegal removal of the ancient oak and the developer's plans gained momentum, Sarah sensed the shadows lengthening around her. The neighborhood had rallied, the media had spotlighted the story, and the board was on edge. But beneath the surface, a quiet war raged. Late one evening, Sarah received an encrypted email with no sender information. The message was simple, but chilling. "They're watching. Trust no one." Her mind raced. Who could they be? the HOA, the developer, or someone else entirely, lurking behind the scenes? Determined to dig deeper, Sarah began to investigate the HOA board members individually. It didn't take long before she uncovered troubling connections. One board member, the treasurer, had ties to the developer through a shell company. Another had recently received an unexplained sum of money deposited into his account. The pieces of a larger puzzle began to emerge. A network of corruption, greed, and cover-ups that reached far beyond the parking lot, or even the tree. She met with Mark Reynolds, the journalist, to share her findings. Mark's eyes widened as he listened. "This could blow the whole case wide open," he said. "But it's dangerous. We need solid proof." Sarah nodded. "I'm ready for whatever comes. I have to be." The next few days were a blur of late nights and whispered phone calls. Sarah coordinated with the coalition, urging neighbors to stay vigilant and report any suspicious activity. One afternoon, while reviewing security footage from a neighbor's camera, Sarah spotted a familiar black SUV lurking near her home again. Its license plate was partially obscured, but a quick search revealed it was registered to a company connected to the developer. She shared the footage with the police, who increased patrols, but warned that without direct evidence of wrongdoing, their hands were tied. Then came the break Sarah had been waiting for. An anonymous source reached out, requesting a secret meeting in a secluded park late at night. Sarah arrived with Mark and Elena, her lawyer, nerves taut, but determination steady. A hooded figure emerged from the shadows, handing over a USB drive. "Everything you need is on here," the voice whispered, before disappearing into the darkness. Back home, Sarah plugged the drive into her computer, heart pounding. The files contained internal emails, financial records, and audio recordings. Undeniable proof of collusion between the HOA board members and the developer to manipulate property lines, falsify documents, and intimidate homeowners. Among the recordings was a conversation revealing plans to discredit Sarah by spreading false rumors about her, aiming to isolate her from the community. As Sarah listened, a mixture of anger and resolve washed over her. The battle was no longer just about the oak tree. It was a fight against systemic corruption, threatening to destroy the neighborhood's soul. She forwarded the files to Mark, who promised to handle them with care. But danger was closing in. That night, Sarah's phone buzzed again with a chilling text. "You've gone too far. This ends now." She locked all doors and windows, but sleep eluded her. The sense of being watched, of enemies lurking just beyond sight, grew stronger. Yet beneath the fear, Sarah felt something else. A fierce, unbreakable will. The ancient oak spirit was alive in her, urging her onward. Tomorrow, the community would learn the truth. The morning air was crisp and sharp, carrying a tension that matched the turmoil in Sarah's chest. The revelations on the USB drive had set the community ablaze. Mark's investigative article hit the front pages with explosive details, exposing the deep-rooted corruption within the HOA and the developer's plans to reshape the neighborhood at any cost. Sarah watched the flood of reactions, from shock and outrage to calls for accountability. Neighbors she hadn't spoken to in years reached out, offering support and sharing their own stories of HOA overreach. The coalition grew stronger, a united front against the forces threatening their homes. The city council convened an emergency hearing, and Sarah was invited to testify, standing before officials, journalists, and a packed room of residents. She spoke with a quiet strength that belied the fear she had carried for months. "This tree was more than wood and leaves," she said. "It was a symbol of our history, our community, and the promises we made to each other as neighbours. Its destruction was illegal, but the corruption behind it is what truly endangers us. Her words struck a chord. The mayor announced immediate steps: a full audit of the HOA, suspension of the board members implicated in the scandal, and a halt to all development projects linked to the controversial parking lot expansion. Legal proceedings followed swiftly. The HOA board president, the treasurer, and others faced charges ranging from fraud and breach of fiduciary duty to intimidation and destruction of protected property. The developers' involvement came under criminal investigation, with evidence pointing to attempts to manipulate municipal processes and silence dissenters. Throughout it all, Sarah remained at the center, testifying, rallying the community, and refusing to let the story fade. But justice was only part of the story. As the dust settled, Sarah and her neighbours began the difficult work of healing. The empty patch where the oak once stood was more than a scar. It was a call to action. With the support of the city and environmental groups, the community launched a restoration project. New trees were planted, each one a promise of renewal and resilience. At the dedication ceremony for the newly planted grove, Sarah spoke once again, her voice steady and hopeful. We may have lost the ancient oak, but its spirit lives on in every root we plant, every leaf that grows, and every heart that cares for this neighborhood. The story of the stolen oak became a symbol, a reminder of what can happen when power goes unchecked, but also of the strength found in unity and courage. Sarah found new purpose, volunteering with local preservation efforts and mentoring others, facing similar battles. And late at night, when the world was quiet, she would sometimes sit beneath the growing saplings, feeling the presence of the ancient oak, not gone, but reborn in the community's fight for justice.